Have you ever walked through a garden and like felt this sense of unease? Like the beauty was hiding something darker,
That's kind of the vibe I got when I was diving into Charles Baudelaire's Les Fleurs du Mal,
which translates to,
The Flowers of Evil.
yeah, the flowers of evil.
Yeah.
It's a fitting title, wouldn't you say? It really
Yeah.
sets the stage for a collection that's both beautiful and unsettling, a journey through the darker side of human nature.
For sure. And we're going to be exploring this world through a cool mix of materials. We've got some of the original French excerpts, and we've got a really neat 1868 edition of the collection. What stood out to you about those different sources?
Well, it's really fascinating to see how Baudelaire's work was presented to the world.
Mm.
I mean, the 1868 edition, for example, gives us some really interesting insights into how it was received by audiences at the time.
Right. It's like a window into history.
Exactly.
So, without giving away any spoilers, what can you tell us about the overall themes and messages in Les Fleurs du Mal? Well, Baudelaire delves into some pretty heavy stuff. He explores the duality of beauty and evil, the allure of the forbidden, and he explores this feeling of deep, soul-crushing boredom that he called spleen and ennui. Have you ever felt that kind of existential angst, like nothing really matters?
Ugly.
Oh,
Like staring into the void on a Sunday afternoon.
exactly.
Yeah.
But Baudelaire takes it to a whole other level. He's not afraid to confront the dark underbelly of human nature.
Yeah, he doesn't shy away from it, does he? The complexities of the human condition.
Yeah,
Even the parts that make us uncomfortable.
exactly.
I read somewhere that this collection caused a huge scandal when it was first published.
Oh, absolutely.
Why was that?
It was considered quite scandalous for its time. I mean, some of the poems were seen as obscene and offensive to public morality. Baudelaire was actually prosecuted for obscenity.
Wow, you don't see that happening with poetry collections these days.
Not so much.
What was so shocking about his work?
Well, for one thing, he tackled some pretty taboo subjects like sex, death, and even Satanism. And he did it in a way that was both beautiful and unsettling, you know? He didn't sugarcoat anything. He showed the world in all its ugliness and beauty.
And it wasn't just the content, it was also his style, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like he used vivid imagery, unconventional language, really pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable in poetry at the time.
Precisely. He didn't just write about these dark themes, he made you feel them. He used language in a way that was almost visceral, like he was reaching out and grabbing you by the throat.
That makes sense. But enough about the controversy. Let's talk about the poetry itself. Were there any particularly memorable moments that stuck with you?
There's so many. One that really struck me was L'Albatros. It's this beautiful and haunting poem about a majestic bird that's captured and ridiculed when brought down to earth.
I remember that one. It's like this metaphor for the artist, right? Someone who sees the world differently, often struggles to fit in. You know that feeling when your unique perspective makes you feel like an outsider. Baudelaire captures that perfectly.
Precisely. And he does it with such powerful imagery and emotional depth. It's a poem that stays with you long after you've finished reading it.
Were there any other poems that had that kind of impact on you?
Oh, definitely. Un charon, which translates to a carcass. It's another one that's hard to forget. It's a graphic and unsettling description of a decaying corpse, but there's also this strange beauty to it.
I could see how that would be both fascinating and repulsive at the same time.
Exactly. Baudelaire had this incredible ability to find beauty in the most unexpected places, even in death and decay.
It's like he's challenging our notions of what's beautiful and what's repulsive. He's asking us to look deeper, to see the world through different eyes.
And he's not afraid to make us uncomfortable in the process.
So for someone who's never read Baudelaire before, what kind of emotional roller coaster should they be prepared for?
Well, Les Fleurs du Mal is definitely an emotional journey. There are moments of beauty, transcendence, and even humor, but there's also a lot of darkness, despair, and even horror.
Sounds intense. Would you say it's for everyone?
I don't know if I'd say it's for everyone. It requires a certain level of maturity and a willingness to confront difficult themes. But for those who are willing to delve into the darker side of human nature, it can be a profoundly rewarding experience.
Okay, I'm getting the sense that Les Fleurs du Mal isn't your typical poetry collection.
Oh, not at all. It's a masterpiece of 19th century French literature, but it's also a work that continues to shock, inspire, and challenge readers even today.
So who would you say is the ideal reader for this collection? Who would really get the most out of it?
I think anyone who enjoys exploring complex themes and challenging conventional notions of beauty would appreciate Baudelaire's work. If you're drawn to the darker side of art and literature, you'll find a lot to love in Les Fleurs du Mal.
It sounds like it would appeal to fans of Gothic literature, maybe even some of the darker romantic poets.
Absolutely. You can definitely see the influence of writers like Edgar Allan Poe in Baudelaire's work. They both explored themes of death, decay, and the macabre, but they did it with such beauty and artistry.
So, for those who are familiar with Poe's work, how would you say Les Fleurs du Mal compares?
Well, both Baudelaire and Poe were masters of atmosphere, creating a sense of unease, but Baudelaire, I think, is even more interested in exploring the psychological and philosophical depths of human experience.
That's interesting. So, while Poe might give you chills with a spooky story, Baudelaire makes you question your entire existence.
Uh-huh, something like that. He's definitely a poet who makes you think.
Now, for someone who's ready to jump into Les Fleurs du Mal, what are some key takeaways, some deeper meanings they should be looking for?
Well, one of the biggest takeaways, I think, is that beauty and evil aren't always clear-cut. They
Yeah.
can coexist, even intertwine, in unexpected ways.
Yeah, that's a theme that runs throughout the entire collection, isn't it? This idea that beauty can be both seductive and dangerous.
Exactly. Baudelaire's work also offers a fascinating glimpse into the social and artistic landscape of 19th century France.
He is writing during a time of great upheaval and change, and his poetry reflects the anxieties and aspirations of that era.
Yeah, he was a keen observer of urban life, and his poems really capture the energy, the beauty, but also the alienation of the modern city.
It's like he's showing us the city through his eyes, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Precisely. He doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of life, but he also finds moments of beauty and transcendence amidst the chaos.
Okay, so we talked about the scandal, the themes, the memorable moments, but before we dive deeper into specific poems, are there any fun facts, any hidden details about Baudelaire or Les Fleurs du Mal that our listeners might find interesting?
Oh, definitely. Did you know that 6 of the poems in Les Fleurs du Mal were actually banned when the collection was first published? They were deemed too obscene for public consumption.
Really?
Yeah.
What happened to them?
They were eventually reinstated, but not until several years later. It's a fascinating example of how societal views on art and censorship can change over time.
Yeah, and it speaks to the enduring power of Baudelaire's work. Even when it was banned, it continued to circulate and influence other artists.
Exactly. Another interesting fact is that Baudelaire was heavily influenced by the symbolist movement in art and literature. Have you ever heard of that?
Vaguely. It's all about symbols and hidden meanings.
Yeah,
It's like-
exactly.
Yeah.
Symbolists believed that art should suggest rather than explicitly state its meaning. They used symbols, metaphors, and other literary devices to create these layered and ambiguous works that were open to multiple interpretations.
And Baudelaire was a master of that, wasn't he?
Absolutely. He was a pioneer of symbolism in poetry.
Yeah.
He used symbols and imagery in a way that was both beautiful and evocative, but also often quite mysterious and unsettling.
So for someone who's not familiar with symbolism, what should they be looking for when they read Baudelaire?
Well, I think the key is to pay attention to the details. The way he uses certain images or objects to represent deeper ideas. And don't be afraid to embrace the ambiguity. There's not always a clear-cut answer or meaning in his poetry.
It's like he's inviting us to participate in the creator process,
Yeah.
right? To bring our own interpretations to the work.
Exactly. He's not trying to spoon-feed us the answers.
Yeah.
He's challenging us to think for ourselves.
Now, before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive into Les Fleurs du Mal, I have to ask, what's your overall impression of the collection?
It's undoubtedly a masterpiece.
Wow.
It's a challenging read, but it's also incredibly rewarding. It's a work that stays with you long after you've finished reading it, haunting you with its beauty, its darkness, and its unflinching honesty.
That's high praise. Would you recommend it to our listener?
Absolutely, but with a caveat.
Ooh, a caveat. I love caveats. Tell me more.
It's not for the faint of heart.
Okay.
Be prepared to be challenged, provoked, and even disturbed. But if you're willing to go on that journey, you won't be disappointed.
I love how you framed that it's a journey, because it really does feel like you're traveling through Baudelaire's mind, experiencing the world through his eyes.
And it's a world that's both beautiful and terrifying, seductive and repulsive.
Okay, so we've got a pretty good overview of Les Fleurs du Mal now. What's next on our deep dive agenda?
Well, now that we've set the stage, I think it's time to delve into some of the most iconic and memorable poems in the collection. We'll explore their deeper meanings, their literary techniques, and their enduring impact on art and literature.
Sounds good to me. I'm already feeling inspired and a little bit terrified, but mostly inspired.
That's the Baudelaire effect, ready to dive into some of these captivating and sometimes unsettling poems.
Absolutely. Let's start with one that we touched on earlier, L'Albatros.
Hmm.
I'm curious to hear more about how it works as a metaphor for the artist.
Oh, yeah, it's such a vivid image, isn't it? This majestic bird soaring effortlessly above the world, but then captured and ridiculed when brought down to earth.
Yeah, it's like a...
Baudelaire uses really strong verbs to kind of paint that picture,
Yeah,
exiled, prince of the clouds, mocked, wings like oars drag heavily.
that contrast is so striking. You almost feel sorry for this magnificent creature, reduced to like a clumsy spectacle.
Exactly. And that's where I think the metaphor really comes in. Baudelaire's suggesting that the artist, like the albatross, sees the world differently. They have this unique perspective, this ability to soar above the mundane. But when they try to share their vision, they're often met with incomprehension, even ridicule.
It's funny because, a lot of people think of artists as being super confident, but I think there's often a deep sense of vulnerability that comes with putting your work out there. It's like you're exposing a part of yourself that you might not fully understand.
That's a great point, and I think Baudelaire captures that vulnerability beautifully in L'Albatros. He's not just talking about the external challenges that artists face, but also the internal struggles, that sense of isolation and doubt that can come with being different.
So even back in the 19th century, artists were dealing with imposter syndrome. Now, that makes me feel a little bit better about my own creative anxieties. Huh?
Yeah. Haha, absolutely. I think the challenges of being an artist are timeless, and that's part of what makes L'Albatros such a powerful and enduring poem. It speaks to something universal about the creative spirit, the joys and the struggles of seeing the world differently.
Okay, I'm ready for another emotional roller coaster. What other poem should we unpack?
Let's delve into Un Chiron, which I know you found both fascinating and repulsive.
Oh, definitely. It's one of those poems that you can't unsee, even if you want to. But there's something about it that keeps drawing me back in. Maybe it's the way Baudelaire takes something so grotesque, so inherently unpleasant, and finds this strange kind of beauty in it.
It's definitely a challenging poem. It forces us to confront the reality of death and decay, something that we often try to avoid in our everyday lives.
Right. It's not exactly light dinner conversation.
No.
But I think there's something profound in Baudelaire's willingness to look death in the face, to explore the beauty that can be found even in decomposition.
He doesn't sugarcoat anything. He describes the decaying corpse in all its gruesome detail, the swollen belly, the black and stinking legs, the liquids that ooze like oil.
Yeah.
And yet amidst all this decay, he finds these moments of unexpected beauty.
Like when he compares the sight to a flower blooming, that's the part that really messes with my head.
It's a shocking image, but it's also incredibly powerful. It forces us to reconsider our own notions of beauty, to see that it can exist at the most unexpected places.
And it's not just about finding beauty in decay, right?
Yeah.
I think Baudelaire is also making a larger point about the cycle of life and death, the way that everything eventually returns to the earth.
Exactly. Un Chiron is a meditation on mortality, on the impermanence of life and the inevitability of death, but it's also a reminder that even in death there can be a kind of transformation, a rebirth. Remember when we talked about the duality of beauty and evil? That comes into play here too.
So he's not saying that death is a good thing, but he's acknowledging that it's a natural part of life, and that even in the process of decay, there can be a kind of beauty.
Precisely. It's a complex and challenging idea, but it's one that Baudelaire explores with incredible depth and sensitivity in Un Chiron.
Okay, I think I need a mental palate cleanser after that one. Let's talk about something a little less, well, decomposing.
How about correspondences? This poem is essential for understanding Baudelaire's worldview and the way he uses symbolism in his poetry.
Perfect. I'm still a little fuzzy on symbolism.
Yeah.
Can you remind me what that's all about?
Essentially, it's the idea that everything in the universe is interconnected and that symbols hold hidden meanings. It's like the world is speaking to us in a secret language, and it's up to the artist, the poet in this case, to decipher those symbols and reveal those hidden connections.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection to Les Fleurs du Mal. There were so many layers of meaning in these poems, so many symbols and metaphors that you could spend hours unpacking.
Exactly. And Correspondences lays out this concept beautifully. Baudelaire describes nature as a temple, where everything from living pillars to perfumes, colors, and sounds speaks to us in a symbolic language.
It's like he's saying that the world is filled with these hidden messages, if only we know how to read them.
And he uses synesthesia, that blending of the senses to create this immersive experience for the reader. Perfumes sweet as a child's flesh, soft as oboes, green as meadows. He's appealing to all our senses at once, creating a symphony of sensations.
Okay, so it's not just about decoding symbols. It's about experiencing the poem on a deeper, more sensory level.
Mm.
It's like he's trying to awaken our senses to the hidden beauty and meaning of the world.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it's a key element of Baudelaire's aesthetic. He wanted his poetry to be more than just words on a page. He wanted it to be an experience, a journey for the senses.
I'm starting to see why he was so controversial in his time. He wasn't just breaking with traditional poetic forms, he was challenging the way people thought about poetry itself.
Absolutely. He was a true innovator, a visionary who pushed the boundaries of what poetry could be. And that's why his work continues to resonate with readers today. He's still ahead of his time in many ways.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired to go back and reread some of these poems with this new understanding of symbolism in mind. But before I do that, I have one more question. We talked earlier about Baudelaire's fascination with the modern city, particularly Paris.
Yeah.
How does that come through in his poetry?
That's a great question. His collection Tableaux Parisiens, Parisian Scenes, offers a fascinating glimpse into the city during his lifetime. He was living in a time of great change and upheaval, and his poems reflect the anxieties and aspirations of that era.
He wasn't just writing about pretty flowers and love sonnets. He was engaging with the social and political issues of his day.
Absolutely. He was a keen observer of urban life, and his poems capture the energy, the beauty, but also the alienation of the modern city.
It's like he's showing us the city through his eyes, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Precisely. He doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of life, but he also finds moments of beauty and transcendence amidst the chaos.
Can you give me an example? What's one of those poems that really captures the essence of Baudelaire's Paris?
Lucing is a great example. It's a complex and multi-layered poem that intertwines personal memory with the changing landscape of the city. Baudelaire begins by recalling the memory of a swan that was once kept captive in the Tuileries Gardens, a symbol of beauty and grace confined to an artificial environment.
And then he links this image to the broader transformations taking place in Paris. The demolition of old neighborhoods, the construction of new boulevards, the displacement of people and memories.
Exactly. It's a poem about loss and change, but also about the enduring power of memory to connect us to the past.
I love how he brings together these seemingly disparate elements, a captive swan, the changing city, and his own sense of melancholy. It's like he's finding these unexpected connections between the personal and the political, the internal and the external.
It's a technique he uses masterfully throughout Les Fleurs du Mal. He's constantly weaving together these different threads, creating a rich and complex tapestry of imagery, emotion, and meaning.
Okay, I'm officially adding Le Cygne to my reading list. I'm curious to see how Baudelaire captures the essence of Paris in this one poem.
You won't be disappointed. It's a poem that will stay with you long after you've finished reading it. And speaking of haunting poems, we can't talk about Tableaux Parisiens without mentioning Les Sept Vieillards.
Ooh, that title sounds ominous. Tell me more.
It's a chilling depiction of these ghostly figures who appear repeatedly to the speaker, like harbingers of death and decay. They're these decrepit old men with hunched backs, trembling limbs, and eyes filled with a haunting sadness.
Okay, I'm getting a serious Edgar Allan Poe vibe here. It's like those creepy old men you see in horror movies, the ones who warn you about the evil that's coming.
Haha, I can see the resemblance. But there's more to it than just spooky imagery. These figures represent something deeper. Something about the city itself. They're like manifestations of the poverty, the sickness, the forgotten lives that exist just beneath the surface of Parisian grandeur.
It's like they're the shadows of the city, the hidden cost of progress and modernization.
Exactly, and the fact that they appear repeatedly to the speaker, always in these crowded, bustling parts of the city, suggests that there's something about the urban environment itself that's conducive to this sense of alienation and unease.
It's like the city is a breeding ground for these anxieties, these fears that we try to repress, but that keep bubbling up to the surface.
That's a great way to put it. Baudelaire's not just describing the physical landscape of Paris, he's capturing the psychological landscape, the way the city can both inspire and haunt us.
Okay, I'm officially creeped out, but also intrigued. I'm starting to see how these Parisian scenes offer a different kind of window into Baudelaire's world, one that's more grounded in the realities of urban life.
And just wait until we explore Le Vin, the section dedicated to wine and its effects.
Oh, I gotta hear, wine and poetry, what could be better?
Well, in Baudelaire's world, wine is more than just a beverage. It's a muse, a source of inspiration, a way of escaping the constraints of reality and tapping into deeper levels of consciousness.
Okay.
But it also has its dark side, its potential for abuse and destruction.
Yeah, this is reminding me of that duality theme we talked about earlier. Even something as pleasurable as wine can have its shadow side.
Exactly. Baudelaire's vision is never one-dimensional. He's always exploring the complexities, the contradictions, the light and shadow of every experience.
I'm ready to raise a glass to that. But before we get too tipsy, let's take a deeper dive into Le Vin and see what Baudelaire has to teach us about the pleasures and perils of the grape.
I think you'll be surprised by what we uncork.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's uncork this Le Vin section, the one dedicated to wine. Remember how Baudelaire was all about beauty and darkness together? Well, wine kind of becomes another example of that. It's like the source of inspiration, but also potential downfall.
So it's not just like romanticizing a glass of Bordeaux.
Not exactly. There's this poem, L'âme du vin, the soul of wine, and it shows that side. Like wine as this comforting spirit, almost a friend, you know? He even uses phrases like golden liqueur and sunshine in a glass.
Sounds pretty idyllic. Almost makes you want to pour a glass right now.
Right. But then there's Le Vin des Chiffonniers, the wine of the rag pickers, and that one's way bleaker.
So like the type of wine reflects different social classes and what they're going through.
Exactly. The rag pickers, they're drinking this blue wine, cheap and harsh stuff. Their wine offers escape, but just temporary, you know? Ultimately, they're trapped in poverty. It's a huge contrast to that golden liqueur we were talking about.
Baudelaire, he really had a way of showing those social differences. Makes you think, like, even simple pleasures can reflect bigger inequalities.
And it's not just social commentary either. There's Le Vin de l'Assassin, and that one takes it even further. Shows how wine can fuel violence, lead to some seriously dark stuff.
Wow, so wine goes from comforting friend to something that can cause terrible things. That's quite a shift.
It is. It's like highlighting that duality of wine, you know? The power to elevate, but also corrupt, inspire, but also destroy. Kind of like a cautionary tale, reminding us that even harmless things can have bad consequences.
Okay, enough darkness for one day. Any poems in this section that are like on the brighter side of wine? Something a bit more, I don't know, romantic.
Absolutely. Le Vin des Amants captures that perfectly, how wine can enhance love, passion. Like it becomes a symbol of their shared, well, intoxication, you know, amplifying their feelings.
Ooh, I like that. It's true. Sharing a bottle can create intimacy, connection.
Exactly. Baudelaire even describes them as two charming children, drunk on both kisses and wine. He uses these really sensual details. You almost taste the wine and feel the passion between them.
Okay, I'm definitely needing a glass after this. What's next in Les Fleurs du Mal? What other territory are we heading into?
We're going into what Baudelaire called Fleurs du Mal itself. This section gets pretty intense. Forbidden desires, darker sides of humanity. He really starts challenging what society considers acceptable here.
Ooh, this is where it gets juicy. Give me a taste. What's in store?
One that stands out is Un martyr, a portrayal of a murdered woman. Gruesome, no doubt, but it also says something powerful about how women are objectified, the violence they face.
Sounds heavy, but I can see how it fits with Baudelaire's themes. He didn't shy away from the ugliness.
Exactly. And he does it in this way that's disturbing yet captivating. He describes her body in detail, but then uses poetic language too, comparing her head to, like, a rare flower on a velvet cushion.
It's that contrast again, beauty and violence. Like, he's making us see that even something delicate can be brutally destroyed.
And even the title, Un martyr, implies her death is more than just random. She's a symbol of suffering, a victim of how society treats women.
Wow, so much to unpack in one poem. Baudelaire really knew how to layer meaning into his work.
He did. And there's also Femme d'Amde in this section about forbidden love between two women. Imagine the scandal back then.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
But it also shows he was ahead of his time, exploring themes that were taboo.
Right. He wasn't afraid to challenge those norms and embrace the complexities of human sexuality. And he does it beautifully, sensitively, even with such a controversial topic.
It makes me think how much art's changed since then, but also how some struggles are still the same. Acceptance, representation, that stuff's still going on.
Very true. Baudelaire reminds us that fighting for artistic freedom, expressing yourself authentically, it's an ongoing thing.
Before we move on, you mentioned another poem, Un voyage à Cythère. What makes that one stick out?
Un voyage à Cythère is like this allegorical journey, a descent into disillusionment. Imagine Cythera, the island, usually about love, beauty, right? He turns it into this desolate place full of decay and death.
Oh, that's a dark turn. What do you think he's saying with that?
It's open to interpretation, but a lot of people see it as a commentary on losing innocence. That realization that our perfect ideas of love, beauty, they clash with how the world actually is.
Like that moment you realize things aren't what they seem, your dreams don't match reality.
Exactly. Disillusioning, but it's also part of growing up, seeing the world clearly.
So even with the darkness, Baudelaire's giving us hope. Like even disillusionment helps us grow.
That's a nice way to put it. And it shows how complex his work is. No easy answers. He makes us face life's messiness, the dark and the beautiful together.
Okay, I'm ready to embrace the messiness. Where to next? What else is there?
Let's hit Revolt, the section where he cranks up the challenge to authority, both societal and divine.
Sounds like classic Baudelaire. What kind of rebellion are we talking here?
He's taking aim at everything: religious hypocrisy, social injustice. There's Le Reniement de Saint-Peter, where he reimagines Peter denying Christ. But in Baudelaire's version, Peter's more sympathetic, disillusioned with God, the church, all that.
Bold move. Makes you wonder if Baudelaire was struggling with his own faith.
Oh, he was definitely wrestling with those spiritual questions. Then there's Abel et Cain, where he takes the Cain and Abel story, but makes Cain, the murderer, into this symbol of rebellion against being oppressed.
He's like, turning the usual story upside down. What's he getting at there?
It's about challenging those in power, questioning everything, speaking up for those who are marginalized, pushed down. Sometimes those labeled evil are just the ones who got wronged by society.
Powerful stuff and still relevant, right?
Uh-huh.
Baudelaire was dealing with those big issues that are still around. Power, justice, all that.
Absolutely. And he pushes boundaries hard. In La Litanie de Satan, he goes as far as writing a hymn praising the devil.
Whoa, he's not holding back. What's the deal with praising Satan? Was he serious or what's going on there?
That's the big question. Some see it as attacking Christianity. Others say it's about rebelling against any authority, human or divine.
Like he's saying, if God's the establishment, I'm with the underdog who breaks the rules.
Exactly. It's provocative, but it reminds us real freedom of thought means questioning everything, even our deepest beliefs.
Feeling a little rebellious myself after that one. Where does Baudelaire leave us in the last section, La Mort? What's the final stop?
He ends facing the unavoidable death. But even there, he finds beauty, meaning. He explores all these different ways of approaching that final journey.
So it's not all depressing.
Not entirely. La Mort des Amants is a peaceful death. Two lovers together in the end. Shows that love can go beyond even death.
That's comforting when you think about something as final as death.
Then there's Le Voyage, the very last poem. Feels like his whole journey summed up. Life full of travel, adventure, but also disappointment. In the end, he embraces death like the ultimate adventure into the unknown.
He's saying life's a journey, ups and downs, and death is just the next part.
Yeah, no easy answers, but he leaves us with a sense of wonder about what comes after.
What a ride. We went from beauty and evil to wine and Satan, all through Baudelaire and Le Fleurs du Mal. Intense stuff.
It really sticks with you. Challenging, thought-provoking, and you don't forget it.
So, listeners, if you're looking for poetry that'll push your boundaries, make you see things differently, Les Fleurs du Mal, visita.
Yeah.
But be ready for an intense, unforgettable experience.
And for those who already know Baudelaire, maybe this sparks some new ideas. We want to hear what you think.
Hit us up on social media. Let us know what resonated with you. And join us next time. We'll be exploring a whole new world. Stay tuned for more unexpected journeys.